Something has quietly changed in the tin beans you've trusted for years, and no one thought to tell you. We're not here to ruin your breakfast. We understand the frustration. Every time a favourite food gets questioned, it feels like something else is being taken away. That's why we didn't rush this. We studied the ingredient lists. We compared old labels to new ones. We checked nutrition panels, reformulations, recalls, and the small print most people never read. And what we found is surprising. As shocking as it may sound, sugar levels have been increased. Tomato content has been quietly reduced, and simple recipes are being replaced with industrial thickeners and additives. In the next few minutes, we're breaking down 9 UK tinned bean brands you must avoid, because if something in your cupboard has changed without you noticing, you have every right to know. 9. Tesco own brand baked beans. Tesco's own brand baked beans sit in millions of cupboards across the UK. They're affordable, easy to grab during the weekly shop, and they carry that quiet sense of reliability. For many families, they're simply a quick solution. Beans on toast, something warm after a long day. Nothing complicated. Most people assume they're getting something close to a traditional recipe. Beans in tomato sauce, a little sugar, a little salt. Straightforward, familiar, safe. And because it carries the name of a major supermarket, there's an automatic trust attached to it. If it's widely sold and widely eaten, it must be fine. But when you look beyond the front label and actually read the nutrition panel, the first concern isn't dramatic, it's gradual. Sugar levels that appear modest per serving become more meaningful when most people eat the entire tin. What looks small on paper can quickly add up in real life. The same applies to salt. On its own, it may not seem extreme, but combined with bread, processed meats, or other everyday foods, sodium quietly builds across the day. That stacking effect is where problems begin. Then there's the composition of the sauce. Tomato is typically listed in concentrated form, diluted back with water. To maintain thickness and consistency, industrial thickeners are used. That rich, slow-cooked look isn't necessarily the result of time, it's formulation. Consumer comparisons have placed Tesco's beans lower than several competitors for flavour and texture. Shoppers frequently mention thinner sauce and reduced tomato depth. When flavour drops, manufacturers often rely more heavily on sweetness and salt to compensate. That kind of shift rarely happens to improve your health. It usually happens when cost control becomes the priority. So, what does that mean for you? It means something that looks like a simple cupboard staple may be more engineered than you realise. It means sugar and salt can quietly become routine rather than occasional. And it means a product that once felt basic may now be optimised more for margin and shelf life than for nutritional balance. Not dangerous overnight, but not as innocent as it appears. And when competition pushes prices lower still, the compromises don't stop. They deepen. 8. Co-op own brand baked beans. Co-op's own brand baked beans carry a different kind of trust. They sit in smaller neighbourhood stores, often positioned as convenient, community-focused and dependable. Many shoppers assume that because Co-op markets itself around ethics and local values, the food on the shelf must reflect that same standard. On the surface, it looks similar to every other tin. Beans in tomato sauce, a short ingredient list. Nothing alarming. It feels like a practical choice. Affordable, accessible, familiar. But when you compare consumer feedback and taste evaluations, Co-op's beans consistently rank lower than several competing brands. Shoppers often describe the sauce as thinner, the flavour as weaker, and the overall texture as less satisfying. That may sound like a simple taste issue, but flavour changes often reveal deeper formulation shifts. When sauce thickness drops, manufacturers frequently adjust the balance using starches or concentrated bases. When natural tomato depth weakens, sweetness and salt are commonly used to rebuild taste. These are common industry tools. Not illegal, not shocking, but they change the nutritional profile over time. And just like with other supermarket brands, the sugar and salt levels may look moderate per serving, but most people don't measure out half portions. A full tin can represent a meaningful share of daily sodium intake, especially when paired with bread or processed sides. The bigger concern isn't one dramatic ingredient. It's cumulative exposure. It's how often these tins are eaten, especially in households where they serve as a go-to quick meal. When taste satisfaction drops while sugar and salt remain steady or rise slightly, it suggests the recipe has been adjusted for cost, stability, and mass production efficiency rather than ingredient integrity. Again, nothing here screams immediate danger, but over time small compromises compound, and when price pressure intensifies, those compromises rarely reverse. They usually expand into the lower tiers of the market, where cutting costs becomes the central strategy. 7. Asda Just Essentials baked beans. Asda's Just Essentials baked beans are designed to be the cheapest option on the shelf. The branding makes that clear. Simple packaging, minimal marketing, a focus on price above all else. For many households trying to stretch their budget, that price difference matters. When you're shopping carefully, saving a few pence on a tin that feels identical to others seems sensible. At first glance, it looks no different from any other baked beans: white haricot beans, tomato sauce, a familiar red colour. Nothing immediately alarming, but when a product is built around being the lowest possible cost, something in the chain has to give. Ingredients are sourced at the most competitive prices. Manufacturing is streamlined. Recipes are adjusted to maintain acceptable taste while keeping margins tight. That's where the health perspective begins to matter. The tomato component in many budget beans is often made from concentrate diluted, back with water. This is common across the industry, but lower cost ranges may reduce the proportion of real tomato solids further to manage cost. When that depth of flavour drops, sweetness and salt become the easiest tools to rebuild taste. Sugar balances acidity. Salt enhances everything else. Both are inexpensive, both are effective. Individually, the sugar and sodium per serving may not appear dramatic, but most people don't measure out half a portion. A full tin can contribute a meaningful share of daily sodium intake in one sitting. Add bread, butter, processed meats, or ready-made sides, and the stacking effect becomes clear. There is also the issue of industrial thickening. To create the appearance of a rich sauce, modified starches or similar stabilizers are commonly used. These ingredients aren't automatically harmful, but they signal a product that is engineered for consistency and cost efficiency, rather than built around whole ingredients. Asda-branded baked bean products have also been included in past recall events involving possible foreign object contamination. While recalls can happen across many brands and don't automatically mean ongoing danger, they do highlight how high-volume, cost-driven manufacturing systems can experience breakdowns. When margins are thin and production speeds are high, there is less room for error. None of this suggests immediate toxicity. The concern is cumulative exposure and quiet reformulation. It's how a product marketed as simple and affordable becomes more industrial over time. It's how cost-cutting gradually reshapes what's inside the tin without a clear announcement. And when price competition intensifies across supermarkets, the pressure doesn't stay in one range. It spreads. Other value lines begin following the same path, adjusting ingredients to stay competitive, sometimes trimming quality in ways most shoppers never notice. 6. Sainsbury's Stamford Street Baked Beans. Sainsbury's Stamford Street baked beans are marketed as a practical, budget-friendly choice. They sit quietly on the shelf, positioned as a sensible option for families trying to manage rising food costs. The branding doesn't scream luxury or premium quality. It signals value, simplicity, and reliability. You move past the front label and study what's actually inside. The picture becomes less straightforward. Start with the sugar. On paper, the amount per serving may look moderate, but most people don't measure out half portions. They eat the entire tin. When you do that, the total sugar intake becomes far more significant, especially if baked beans are eaten more than once a week. Sugar in isolation might not seem alarming, but in combination with cereals, snacks, sauces, and ready meals, it adds up faster than most households realize. Now consider the sodium. Beans are rarely eaten alone. They're paired with toast, butter, sausages, bacon, or processed sides. Each of those adds its own salt load. A simple, comforting plate can quietly approach or exceed a large portion of the recommended daily sodium intake in one sitting. It doesn't feel excessive. But the numbers tell a different story. Then there's the tomato base. Like many budget-tier beans, the sauce is typically made from tomato concentrate diluted back with water. That isn't unusual in itself. The concern is proportion. When the percentage of real tomato solids decreases, depth of flavor weakens. To rebuild that taste, sweetness and salt are often adjusted. It's a subtle balancing act, one that favors cost control over ingredient richness. The texture also reveals something about the manufacturing process. The sauce has a uniform thickness and glossy consistency that is usually achieved through industrial stabilizers and modified starches. These ingredients help standardize large production runs and extend shelf life. They aren't necessarily toxic, but they signal a product designed for efficiency and scale rather than simplicity. There have also been recall events involving UK supermarket branded canned beans in recent years due to contamination concerns. While these incidents do not automatically imply ongoing danger, they remind us that high-volume, cost-pressured manufacturing environments are not immune to mistakes. If you're finding this breakdown helpful, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. It tells the platform that you value this kind of investigation, and it helps more people understand what's actually inside everyday foods they trust. Because that's the real issue here. It's not about panic, it's about patterns. When sugar creeps upward, when tomato content thins out, when industrial thickeners quietly replace depth and quality. Each change on its own may seem minor, but over time those adjustments redefine what we think of as a simple, harmless staple. And when price competition intensifies even further, the compromises rarely disappear. They move somewhere else. 5. Morrison's Savers Baked Beans. Morrison Savers baked beans are often among the very cheapest tins you'll find in a UK supermarket. For families watching every pound, that price difference can feel like a small victory. When two tins look almost identical, but one costs noticeably less, it seems logical to choose the cheaper option. On the surface, it appears straightforward. Beans in tomato sauce, nothing complicated. The packaging is simple. The branding is minimal. It doesn't pretend to be premium, but extremely low pricing almost always reflects aggressive cost control somewhere in the production process. When margins are tight, ingredients are sourced at the lowest available rates. That often means relying heavily on tomato concentrate diluted with water rather than a richer tomato base. It can also mean adjusting the balance of sugar and salt to maintain flavor without increasing ingredient costs. The nutritional panel may not look alarming at first glance, but as with other value ranges, the per-serving figures can mask what a full tin actually represents. Sugar and sodium levels that seem moderate in isolation become more significant when consumed regularly and combined with other processed foods. There's also the matter of sauce composition. Many budget beans use modified starches or stabilizers to create a thick, glossy consistency. That uniform texture is engineered. It ensures the product looks and behaves the same in every batch, but it also signals a formulation built around manufacturing efficiency rather than ingredient depth. Consumer feedback for ultra-budget beans frequently mentions smaller beans, thinner sauce, or inconsistent texture. While these are often dismissed as minor quality differences, they can indicate sourcing changes or cost-driven substitutions in raw ingredients. None of this suggests that a single tin is catastrophic. The concern lies in repetition. When the cheapest option becomes the regular option, small compromises become habitual intake. Sugar and salt are no longer occasional extras. They become part of the daily pattern. And as we move away from the value ranges and into brands marketed as richer or better tasting, the assumption is that things improve. But higher price does not always mean cleaner formulation. 4. Branston Baked Beans. Branston baked beans are often presented as the better tasting option. thicker sauce, richer flavour, more tomato depth. For many shoppers, especially those who moved away from supermarket value ranges, Branston feels like a small upgrade, something closer to how beans should taste. That perception matters. When a product feels premium, people naturally lower their guard. They assume that a richer flavour means better ingredients. They assume a thicker sauce means more tomato. They assume a higher price reflects higher quality. But flavour intensity and nutritional balance are not the same thing. That deeper, sweeter taste has to come from somewhere. In mass-produced baked beans, it is often achieved through careful adjustment of sugar, salt, and concentrate ratios. Tomato concentrate allows manufacturers to control consistency and flavour strength, but it is still concentrate diluted back with water. It's efficient and stable, but it is not the same as a slow-cooked tomato base. When you examine the nutrition panel, the sugar and sodium levels remain meaningful. They may not stand out dramatically compared to other brands, but that is precisely the point. Even a better tasting tin still contributes to daily sugar and salt intake in a way most consumers underestimate. And because Branston is perceived as superior in flavour, it is often eaten more frequently. That's where cumulative exposure becomes important. A weekly habit can quietly turn into multiple servings across the week, especially in households where baked beans are considered a quick, dependable meal. The sauce thickness is another clue. The consistency is highly uniform from tin to tin. That uniformity is not accidental. It reflects industrial formulation, stabilization, and controlled processing. The goal is predictability. Every tin tastes and looks the same, regardless of where it was packed. Again, this is not about one shocking ingredient. It's about expectation versus reality. A brand positioned as richer or better can still rely on the same industrial processes as value tiers. It can still lean on sugar and salt to reinforce flavor. It can still prioritize shelf stability and margin protection over simplicity. When you pay more, you expect improvement. But improvement in taste does not automatically equal improvement in health profile. And as we move further into brands operating at massive global scale, the conversation shifts from flavour adjustments to something more structural: sourcing, volume, and safety systems that operate on an entirely different level. 3. Lidl Newgate baked beans. Lidl's Newgate baked beans are often praised for value. In some consumer taste comparisons, they even score surprisingly well against more expensive brands. That performance gives many shoppers confidence. If it tastes good and costs less, it feels like a win. But taste tests measure flavour and texture, not long-term health impact. Like most baked beans sold at aggressive price points, Newgate relies on a tightly controlled formulation designed for consistency and cost efficiency. The tomato element is typically concentrate-based, diluted and adjusted to maintain a stable flavour profile. That's standard across much of the industry, but the proportion matters. When tomato solids are reduced to manage costs, sweetness and salt often compensate to rebuild flavour balance. On the nutrition panel, sugar and sodium may not look extreme per serving. Yet again, the serving size rarely reflects how people actually eat baked beans. A full tin can meaningfully contribute to daily sugar intake, and when combined with bread and other processed items, sodium levels stack quickly. Another factor with private label supermarket brands is supplier variability. Large discount chains frequently work with multiple manufacturers to maintain low prices. While this is not inherently unsafe, it can lead to subtle differences between batches, texture shifts, sauce thickness variations, slight flavour changes. Consumers sometimes notice it, sometimes they don't. What matters from a health perspective is the processing model itself. Industrial baked beans are engineered for long shelf life, visual consistency, and predictable taste across millions of tins. Stabilizing agents and processing controls ensure uniformity. That reliability benefits retailers, but it also reflects a product optimized for efficiency rather than ingredient simplicity. There have been recall events across UK supermarket-branded canned bean lines in recent years due to contamination concerns. While not exclusive to Lidl and not constant, such incidents highlight the vulnerabilities of high-volume food systems operating under tight cost structures. Again, this isn't about panic, it's about pattern recognition. When price competition is fierce and margins are slim, ingredient adjustments become normalized. Small changes in tomato content, small increases in sweetness, slightly altered sourcing. Individually, they seem insignificant. Collectively, they redefine the product. And when you move beyond supermarket labels to brands operating at national and international scale, the stakes and the systems behind them become even larger. 2. Prince's Baked Beans. Prince's Baked Beans are not always the first brand people think of, but they are widely available across UK supermarkets. They sit quietly on shelves, often priced competitively, often chosen as a mid-range alternative between premium and value tiers. On the surface, they appear unremarkable. Beans, tomato sauce, familiar red tin, nothing that immediately signals risk. But Prince's became the subject of a documented recall involving canned bean products due to the possible presence of foreign objects. Recalls do not automatically mean a product is permanently unsafe. They can happen across many food categories. However, when contamination risks surface in something as simple as baked beans, it forces a deeper question about manufacturing oversight. Canned foods are produced at enormous scale. High-speed packing lines, automated sealing, industrial sterilization processes. When everything works correctly, it is efficient and safe. When something fails, the scale magnifies the impact. A single issue can affect thousands, sometimes millions, of tins. From a nutritional standpoint, Prince's beans follow the common baked bean formulation model. Tomato concentrate diluted back with water, sugar added for flavor balance, salt added for preservation and taste, stabilizing agents to maintain texture across long shelf life. Individually, none of these elements are extraordinary, but the health concern lies in repetition and assumption. Because baked beans are perceived as a basic food, people rarely think of them as processed, yet they are industrially manufactured, sealed, sterilized, and engineered for stability. When a recall enters the picture, even temporarily, it disrupts that perception of simplicity. It reminds consumers that what appears like a humble staple is actually the result of a complex production system. And complex systems can fail. Add to that the cumulative sugar and sodium intake from regular consumption, and the conversation shifts from a one-time safety event to a broader question of routine dietary exposure. Prince's may not look dramatically different from its competitors on the surface, but when a brand is publicly associated with a contamination recall, trust becomes more fragile. And when trust weakens, it pushes attention toward brands that carry even larger legacy reputations, brands people believe have stood the test of time. That belief, however, deserves careful examination. 1. HP Baked Beans. HP Baked Beans carry history. The brand has been part of British cupboards for generations. For many people, it represents tradition, something familiar, something dependable, something that feels unchanged. That sense of history creates powerful trust. When a brand has been around for decades, consumers assume stability. They assume the recipe is largely the same. They assume the product still reflects the simplicity it once did. But food manufacturing does not stand still. Over time, recipes evolve. Ingredients are adjusted. Suppliers change. Production methods become more industrial, more efficient, more cost-focused. These shifts rarely come with bold announcements. They happen gradually, almost invisibly. Modern baked beans, including legacy brands, are built around concentrate-based tomato systems, controlled sugar levels for taste consistency, sodium for flavor balance and preservation, and stabilizers to maintain texture. The sauce that looks rich and glossy is not the result of slow kitchen cooking. It is the product of tightly controlled industrial processing. From a health perspective, the concern is not dramatic toxicity. It is repetition. It is how often a product like this lettuce is eaten without scrutiny. Sugar and sodium levels that seem ordinary on a label become more meaningful when consumed weekly, or several times a week. There is also the psychological factor. When a product is perceived as traditional and wholesome, it bypasses caution. People question new, unfamiliar foods. They rarely question what they grew up with. That is where risk becomes invisible. It is not that HP beans are uniquely catastrophic compared to every other tin on the shelf. It is that they benefit from deep-rooted trust. And trust can reduce scrutiny. Over years, small formulation changes, slight sweetness adjustments, sourcing shifts, processing intensification reshape the product quietly. What remains is the brand name and the memory attached to it. But what is inside the tin today reflects modern industrial priorities: shelf stability, cost management, uniformity, and mass distribution, not kitchen simplicity. And that is the pattern across all 9 brands we have looked at. This isn't about panic, it's about awareness. If you choose to eat baked beans, that's your decision. But now you know to check the sugar per full tin, not just per serving. You know to look at sodium levels more carefully. You know to read beyond the front label and focus on what's actually inside. If possible, rotate your meals. Don't rely on the same processed staple multiple times a week. Consider lower sugar versions, reduce salt options, or even making your own from dried haricot beans and real tomatoes when time allows. Control doesn't come from fear, it comes from information. If this breakdown helped you see something differently, take a moment to like the video. It helps this channel reach more people who are trying to shop wisely, not perfectly. Subscribe if you want more honest investigations into everyday UK foods, not to shame your choices, but to protect them. And tell me in the comments, which cupboard staple should we examine next?